Hi, everybody. It's been a while since I've seen you virtually. I'm going to take my mask off. I need to point out there are two other people in the room, both wearing masks, and both about 10 or 15 feet away from me, so trying to do our best to social distance. But it seems that video with a mask on is not quite as effective as one without, so I'm going to take it off for now. Today, Vice Chancellor Bomotti and I are going to talk about the budget. There's been a host of things to talk about, Lord knows, with COVID and classes and research and social distancing and all. But the budget is the piece that has been evolving as rapidly as many other parts, but also will have very long-term consequences for our campus. And it seemed like a conversation just about the budget was warranted. The University of California, Riverside has a budget of about $1 billion. That's a billion with a B. About half of that, 550 million, something like that, is what we call the core budget of the university. And the core budget is what functions to support the core, the instructional mission, the operations of the campus, things that my mother would think of as the university. And of that 500 million or so, half a billion, that is about split half and half. Half of it comes from tuition, a little more actually, about 60%, and about half of it comes from the state. The core budget with those two pieces means we have to be very focused on what money is coming from the state. And if you've been reading the paper, you know how in flux that dollar amount has been. The Senate, the Assembly, the governor have all struggled to predict against future revenue of the state, tax revenue for the state, and how then to apportion those dollars among all the needs. Not just universities, of course, but K-12, social programs, all the services that are so taxed in this pandemic are also desperately in need of dollars. And right now we anticipate a reduction of the state contribution by anywhere from 5 to 10%, maybe more if things go even worse. But we're starting to plan in the 8, 9, 10% range, most likely. That's in the face of costs for the campus that keep going up. So most of our budget is allocated to salaries, and in general, our salary budget is going to go up about 3% next year. So 3% increase on the expenditures, 0% increase on half of our budget, and a reduction of 8, 10% or more on part of our revenue. Leaves a pretty sizable gap. And that's not a gap that necessarily will go away. Again, reading the paper, you know that this is a long-term challenge that the state and the nation face. So it's quite likely that we'll have the very same reduction next year and maybe another one. Rather than an increase next year, we may see another decrease in support from the state. And I can tell you it's going to be very difficult for leaders around the country, including our regents, to make a decision to increase tuition on students given the nature of the economy. Those facts don't leave us in a very optimistic position for the future. It means we're going to have to make a lot of very difficult decisions about our operations and how we can manage to support them with fewer and fewer financial resources. I've been in higher education my entire career, and most everyone I talk to will tell you this is the worst budget challenge we've seen in our industry. In part because of the magnitude, in part because of the limited options we have for addressing them, and in part because of the uncertainty and the long-term risk here. If we compare ourselves to 10 years ago, during what we refer to as the Great Recession, here at the university we had a serious reduction in state support, but we also had an opportunity, and the Board of Regents chose to take it, to significantly increase tuition, so that the net impact on our budget was not nearly as large as it might have been. And as I just shared, that option is really not an option this time, at least not for the next year or two. So the magnitude is large and the options are small. This is a serious, serious budget challenge we're facing. I know each of you has your own role in the university, your own salary that's important to you and your family, your own concerns about your future perhaps financially, but also in terms of health and all the things that are on our minds. I wish I could tell each of you more about your individual situation, but unfortunately I can't, partly because the budget situation continues to flux in terms of what the actual dollars will be, but also there are so many various employment situations and options that we all have to think about going forward. Right now, pretty much every option is on the board. The one that I want us to rely most heavily on is simply not replacing people who choose to leave the university through retirement or other reasons. The extent to which we can simply not hire new people saves a lot of money in the budget. While I hope that stopping as much new hiring as possible will get us through, I worry that may not be enough. We've already had some layoffs within the core budget of the operation, and I fear that others may follow, but it's really too early for me to know what all might happen in the months ahead. A lot of people ask me, okay, so what are the priorities here? And I start with, the priorities are the things that make UCR UCR. Number one, the quality of our academic and research programs. That has to be maintained, or we're not who we want to be. A second thing that's important to us is our sense of support for each other and inclusion. We have a university that's known internationally, not just because of our research prowess, but the way that we embed so many people and perspectives into that prowess. We can't let that go either. Beyond that, there's lots of different individual questions about what could or should be prioritized, one department, one activity, one program above or below another. Gerry will talk a bit about the Budget Advisory Committee and the work they've done to advise us all on what more specific kinds of priorities we might create. But I can tell you, preliminary conversations, the Budget Advisory Committee has talked to lots of groups and individuals across the campus. And I will tell you, there are 3 or 4 programs that many people see could manage a budget reduction of some kind or another. I think you could reduce the budget and fill in the blank. I won't tell you what they were. But I can tell you, of the top 4 programs on that list, if we eliminated them entirely from the campus, just did away with them, which I don't think is even possible, and still have a functioning university, but if we did, that still wouldn't fill the budget hole that we have. So simply targeting a few places is not going to be sufficient. This is going to be a process where we're going to have to look at everything, high priorities and low priorities, and make individual decisions about resources across the campus.
So there's a budget advisory committee that advises the campus leadership, so provost and chancellor. And in normal times, they would give recommendations about increases, new investments. So we repurposed them this cycle basically to help focus on how do we basically come up with recommendations we can give to the provost and chancellor for approaching this significant financial challenge. That budget advisory committee has, I'm on it, the provost is on it, the associate provost is on it. The chair of the Academic Senate Planning and Budget Committee is on there, and we try to work very closely with that group in particular. They'll make their own recommendations, but we want that feedback from that group because they're quite knowledgeable about the campus budget. There are 2 deans, there are 2 CFAO officers on there. There's the vice chancellor for research and economic development, and there's also basically an individual in charge of a lot of the auxiliary programs for the campus and this cycle. That's Denise Woods. So we've had 10 outreach meetings so far, including 2 really broad-based campus open fora to gather input from people, but also to educate them a little bit on the budget process and what the budget looks like and what are our options for cutting and the like. We've had a email address they could submit material to. We've had survey information that they could submit. And so we've pretty much distilled all that, and now we're basically as a committee getting ready, hopefully in the next 10 days, to present those recommendations to the provost and the chancellor. So, as the Chancellor went over, there's a sort of the core budget and there's the non-core budget. And in this financial downturn, both have issues. So, the auxiliary programs also have financial challenges, but the focus of the Budget Advisory Committee is really on the core budget. So, what we get to support that comes in from the state and student tuition and fees and the like. And so, when you look at that and you look at the expenditure side of things, over 2/3 of that expense is in salaries and benefits for positions. Another like 17% or so is financial aid, and we're not going to reduce that. And so there's some small amount of operating, but really, unfortunately, the issues are focused on salaries, benefits, hopefully some use of vacant positions. Many people have been holding vacant positions. So they can basically address what they're expecting to be a budget reduction target coming in the near future. So I think that question comes up a lot, and it's reasonable because most people don't spend every day working through the university budget. So it is dependent upon assumptions that are made. So let's go look at the Great Recession, which the Chancellor went over. That turned out to be 6 state budget cuts over 3.5 years. Likely no one knew at the first budget cut that there would be 5 more. So it's a projection at this point in time saying, will this downturn in the state economy be a one-time small blip that'll basically jump back any time at the near future, basically. So when you look at that, you understand that much of the state revenue comes from income taxes, like 70%, something like that. And the income taxes they collected this year, which are already below what they expected in January, are basically based on, or not basically, they're totally based on the 2019 tax year. So next year, a year from now, they'll be collecting that revenue from the 2020 tax year. We already understand with the unemployment and other financial challenges, that will likely go down from whatever source it is, whatever level it is now. And so I think you have to make an assumption. Is this a one-time blip, or is this going to be something that lasts several years before the state is able to get back on its feet, fund the UC system and UCR, and also be able, how are we as a campus going to be able to deal with fixed cost increases, including salaries, but also including specifically benefits. So when you look at that, I think many people, not all, but many people make the determination that this isn't just fiscal year 21, but it's likely fiscal year 22 and maybe a little hangover into fiscal year 23. And so, like the Great Recession, I think we're planning for, or looking at planning for, the longer term budget issues. Now, I'll be thrilled if that turns out not to be correct, and that by the end of the year there's a vaccine that everyone gets, and it turns out to be a short-term blip. But still, the 20 tax year will have implications for the state. We do have hopes that the federal government may give us some money, one-time money. But again, that one-time money can extend the amount of time we have to implement base budget cuts, but it can't really replace them unless what happens is that the recovery is so quick that it's and unexpected for whatever other economists are suggesting. So many economists are looking at this from 3 years to 10 years. Now throw out the 10 years, it seems too long, but 3 years is maybe reasonable. 2 to 3 years, I think, is what most people believe will be the financial impact of COVID-19. So the recommendation of the Budget Advisory Committee, I think, will be more broad. They're not going to say College X needs to cut this amount of money or anything like that. But it'll look at the difference between the academic areas, the administrative areas, areas that have been identified as very important for the campus. So things like graduate education in particular has come up a lot. As we come up with these recommendations, I think they'll likely identify some areas that could be strategic cuts. Now, meaning that elimination or more likely significant reductions in some areas that, albeit they're important for the campus and serve a very important purpose, with the limited resources we have, aren't as high a priority as some of these other issues that are out there. So I expect we'll give recommendations to the Provost and Chancellor about these parameters, these strategic cuts, and kind of the relative ratio of cuts between academic and administrative areas. Then it's up to the Chancellor and the Provost basically to determine, do they accept our recommendations first and foremost, but secondly, if they do, what do they think is a reasonable allocation of that out to the individual units? So if I'm a dean, I'll want to know what's my cut target or parameter for cut target. Budget Advisory Committee won't give that, but the Provost will have to. And so then the work really begins there, because now that dean, that director, that associate vice chancellor, they're going to have to work on their own individual budget and bring back recommendations that are consistent with those budget targets. And the Budget Advisory Committee is going to hold hearings to hear what their proposal is for these budget reduction targets. The reason for that is that we want to make sure there's not any unintended consequences of some of these cuts, where you find out, gee, we cut these programs, but they're really providing services to another unit, and now this increases the cost for that other unit, or somebody implemented a recharge activity or whatever, something that is not consistent with the parameters and the assumptions for the budget reduction. So the Budget Advisory Committee will have hearings on all those proposals, and then we'll give comments back and recommendations to the Chancellor and the Provost again. And so then I think they would look at those, they'd take action on it, they might make some adjustments to some of the proposals that have come in that we don't think are exactly matching the goals and priorities that we had established as a university. But really, at the end of the day, the deans, the associate vice chancellors, the vice chancellors, the people that are in charge of those individual org budgets, those are the ones that are going to have to identify the details of how we make these budget reductions, how they fit into the overall program, like whether it be a college level where it's built up of individual departments, or at an administrative area, how those administrative cuts differ likely between different departments based on need and priority and the like. And so it will be a process that will involve pretty much everybody on campus, because everybody is impacted by this. And then we'll basically finalize those. The technical process will be reducing the budgets and kind of moving forward, hopefully, to a quick end to the COVID-19 and therefore the financial issues associated with it. When you look at travel, it's an important part of our budget, but it's not a very large part. So in the core budget, it's like 0.5% or less of the whole core budget. So even if you gave up all travel, you're a small way towards this budget whole. And certainly even with utilities and other savings like that, the loss of revenue and other costs like extra cleaning, the testing programs that we're bringing up and will have to support for the campus. And again, combined with what I just mentioned, the revenue losses, they really outweigh all of the other savings that we might have. The savings, we are accumulating those, we're putting them towards the overall budget target, but it's very small in comparison to the targets for the budget reduction that we face. So those are all savings that we'll take anywhere, any place we can get them, but they don't really add up to and don't solve any of the problems. I mean, people have also asked questions about higher paid salaries for employees. Why don't we take everybody that's over $200,000 and give them a 10% budget cut or something in their salaries? Well, that would be a one-time savings. I don't think you could do it, on a continual basis there. But when you look at that numbers and you take 10% of everybody's salary, it's a little less than $3 million. So that's $3 million. It's a lot of money, but it doesn't fill a $50 million hole for FY21. And it by itself is not going to be a permanent budget cut. And so I think a lot of this work of the Budget Advisory Committee and the material we put together, and we're updating that material to get it out to campus, is to help not only gather information from campus faculty, staff, and students, but also to try to educate them about the budget, because a lot of people do think it's reasonable. Gee, we had a lot of savings here, we had a lot of savings there, but salaries and benefits are where we, as most campuses like ours, spend the vast majority of our resources. You know, that's probably the most important question. How do we deal with the faculty and staff of the institution who are there serving all our students that are hopefully coming for an education here at UCR? So as I look at those situations, these are the most difficult and heartbreaking for me. For example, in housing and dining, we had no activity, everything was canceled for the summer. We had absolutely no work, and so we move forward on some temporary layoffs. Now, our hope is that we're able to bring people back, or at least some, if not all of them, for the fall. But when you look at our faculty and staff, you think, at least I think, about the normal pressures people have in their personal and professional lives. You add on it the fear, I would say, of COVID-19 and what it could do to you, your family, your friends, or whatever. You add on the enormous economic challenges that are brought about by COVID-19. You then add some of the social and cultural issues that are out there relative to the police departments and activities associated with that. You know, how we deal with diversity, how we deal with equity in as a society. But then you look at these issues of the K-12 system, and if they can't open up, what does that mean for our employees, our faculty and staff, and students who basically need to support their families in some ways there, as well as childcare? We're hoping to open our childcare program early next August, early as coming August, if in fact the state still allows that to happen. But many working families rely on not just childcare, but K-12 in order for them to be able to go to work. And so I fully understand that the most heartbreaking issue here is the impact on our faculty, staff, and students who, on top of all these other pressures and stresses, are still out there every day, either coming to campus, many of them, or working remotely to support the needs of the campus. And so that's an extraordinary situation to thank everybody for, I would say, and hopefully we can get through this COVID-19 as soon as possible, get everybody back to work, and get all our students back on campus. And so, and put this behind us. I think everybody wants that. We just don't know when.
It's hard to describe an organization as big as UCR in a short video, or even describe all the budget realities in a short video. But please go to the website and keep going to the website, because we're going to continue to try to put as much information there as we possibly can to keep everybody informed. And stay safe.